Hello and welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see you today, and I'm really excited to be chairing this Artful Leadership webinar hosted by the Bureau Arts-Based Educational Research SIG. So just to give you a little background about the webinar, today we're going to be exploring how artistic and playful methods can enhance educational leadership. We're focusing on how leadership can be shaped, reshaped, reimagined through arts-based knowing. We're thinking about promoting equity, creativity, and justice in education through the use of the arts. And the presentations that you will see today are case studies from international research featured in the forthcoming Bloomsbury Handbook of Arts-Based Educational Research. The image that you see on your screens is an original artwork by one of the editors of the handbook, Daisy Pillay, and I thought that its title, Breaking Free, was particularly pertinent for today's presentations because we're thinking about perhaps breaking free from conventional models of educational leadership research through exploring the arts. So just to tell you a little bit about the handbook, the editors are myself, Kathleen Pithouse-Morgan, Daisy Pillay, Claudia Mitchell, Rebecca Berkeley, and Adam Hart. And we have a fantastic range of contributors, over 70 contributors from 13 different countries. And there are 5 sections in the handbook: the creative educator, artistic identities, artscaping community, creative advocacy, and the theme that we will be focusing on today, which is artful leadership. So today's webinar starts with an introduction, and then we are moving on to our first presentation, which is creative wayfaring as arts-based method, embodying a transformative artful leadership praxis. And that is going to be presented by Anna Cohen-Miller, Nadia Drescher-Lambertus, and Nupur Samuel. Then we have arts-based knowing and educational leadership and management practice, presented by Inbenathan Naika. We will have a short discussion and Q&A, and then we will close after that. So I'm delighted and very excited to invite our first group of speakers to share their presentation with you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. I think you can hear me, yeah? Okay, perfect. So first of all, it is such a pleasure to be here today. And as Kathleen was saying, I'm Anna Cohen-Miller, and I'm here today with Nadia Drescher-Lambertus and Nupur Samuel. We want to thank Kathleen Pithouse-Morgan for the invitation today, and the Bureau Events for the platform, and Garvin Payne for coordination, and in particular, all of you for your presence around the globe. So I'm going to pause actually for a moment, a practice of contemplative inquiry as research and pedagogical practice, to welcome in a space for all of us to be and learn together, to feel guided by collective wisdoms of past, present, and future. So I'm going to take a couple deep breaths. Feel free to join me if you would like. Thank you. So today we will be talking about our chapter, Creative Wayfinding as Arts-Based Method, Embodying a Transformative Artful Leadership Practice. And we will go back and forth between the 3 of us who co-created this piece, reading also snippets from the chapter, offering an invitation to learn and grow together. And we have chosen, just so you know, we've chosen to include exact words and excerpts and phrasings on the PowerPoint as a means to be more inclusive across languages, accents, and for any kind of online choppiness. So next slide, please.
We invite you into an epistemological and ontological shift in thinking and being to collectively be in the world. Today, we want to offer a non-prescriptive, speculative arts-based method and a practice that weaves academic voice and artful creativity to embody and reimagine leadership in higher education. And I want to quote Matabo and Bai's wayfinding, an art that affirms and generates connection, where the collective, relational self tied to place, ancestors, and people may thrive. Next slide, please.
So here we have a positionality of being. We will read short snippets about ourselves, of arts, of generational unfolding. This is from our chapter. And so, as I say, in centering my positionality to the arts and leadership, I am pulled back to my childhood and how much the arts gave across generations. In my adult years, I learned of the deeply impactful decisions about what to leave and what to keep when fleeing one's homeland, names, languages, cultures. Drawing and painting in particular offered spaces to be with family, building relationships and embodying solutions. Professionally, the arts across mediums became a means for working with communities and in research, a tool, method, and methodology for empowerment. And ultimately, the arts, research, and leadership have found a natural home together, resonating and finding meaning, bringing richness, transitioning between intellectual analysis to felt sensorial meaning.
For me, growing up on a post-colonial Caribbean island, where I had to learn the official Dutch language to express myself in the classroom, even when my Creole mother language, Papiamento, was what came natural to me for self-expression. Because of the experience of language exclusion, I needed new ways to articulate my thoughts, feelings, and creativity beyond the confines of what is thought to be the right language. Arts-based methods allowed me to give voice to the non-representational, to the rich aliveness swirling beneath words. Collaging, in particular, takes center stage in my scholarship and teaching practice through embodiment, the craft of layering, assembling, movement, juxtaposition, and imagery, invoking memory practices aligning with my Caribbean Creole ways of being, where patchworking, storying, and improvisation are central. Arts-based method guiding me, this time through ecological decolonial life writing and hydrofeminisms, working with water and poetry as Caribbean decolonizing methods.
I was born in a Christian family in India, and my childhood memories resonate with my father's favorite Hindi and Urdu ghazals playing on a recorder, accompanied by the noisy sewing machine as my mother stitched my dresses copied from various magazines. While we, the children, ran about playing with each other and the many pets and rescues that were part of the family. My mother used to call them her own children. And as an English as a second language speaker, teaching writing has heightened my awareness of how languages and narratives shape identity, particularly for those whose voices are often overlooked. Outside of academia, my artistic pursuits, learning to crochet, experimenting with watercolor painting, and fostering numerous animals from birds to squirrels to dogs reflect my belief in the value of patience, exploration, and care in both leadership and creative practice. I have brought these experiences for others to share through art based reflection in formal and informal group settings in higher education contexts. Next slide, please.
So our methodological process, and so the positionality, right? You get to understand a little bit about us and hear a bit of who we are. This then came into our methodology. So the process was messy, right? We talk about research as being messy, and it was also full of life. It was grounded in feminist collaborative art space, one which we've brought to this presentation as well, one recognizing and valuing each individual. Such spaces have been particularly meaningful to us that in spaces of academia and spaces of challenge, and our process created a sense of belonging and validation, often lacking in academic environments. We created a WhatsApp group, nourishing a space for feedback, trust, vulnerability, support through life's joys and unexpected heartache. We were texting with each other between the breaks also, right? Like it's a continuing, evolving presence and collaboration. And messages were sent synchronously, asynchronously, sudden ideas that came up. And you can learn more in the chapter about some of this process. Feel free to ask questions, of course. Long conversations between people, videos when we were able to work across the multiple time zones, and the conversations flowed over weeks and months. Our chapters first draft scripted, then woven, rewoven, allowing ourselves to settle. Texts were transferred to Google Docs, screenshots of writing shared, reshared, along with photos and other types of ways of interacting. Next slide, please.
So to continue, through texts, we ask ourselves and each other questions, clarifying, refining, extending, but also slowing down. We started asking questions such as, how could our feelings be embodied? What would be a catalyst for an event? What might change? What could it look like, feel, taste? We shared photos and videos of our days, and this opened us to develop trust, vulnerability, to delve into creativity. These exchanges became part of what we talk about as a methodology called creative assemblage. In the exchange and sharing of our lives and feeling, we developed three characters for a story evolving from a tension of thinking about the world, of academia and leadership, of failure and success and the meaning of this, of making and creating, and ultimately of being. These characters were and are each of us individually, but also collectively. A story beneath the story, representing and embodying archetypal issues, a journey which could be called a hero or a heroine's journey, but one that is non-binary and ecological, one that is expansive. Each character is one of us. Next slide, please. So here is our creative assemblage, how it sounds and looks like. And we want to share the aliveness. Next slide, please. Mycelia, sometimes called mushroom by those who didn't know any better, had the most beautiful wisdom the world has ever known. We like to call them Mycie. And Mycie loves to talk with others, chatting with the trees and the ground in particular, always translating. Mycie has this magic power, only visible at the surface, yet growing and fruiting way below what regular people can see. Sometimes Miss Mycie would attach to a tree or sprawl on the ground. They could speak with all creatures and would immediately feel at home. It was almost as if Mycie was part of becoming with other creatures, too, a home for all. Sometimes people wanted Mycie to be something or another, yet Mycie is both and more. Mycie is always plural. Usually, they felt good about themselves, but this day, something was different. Because Mycie is usually underground, they're not always seen. Do others know who we are? Sometimes. Sometimes others know of Mycie and sometimes not. We think of those who know as the lucky ones, knowing another world exists. And Mycie tries to find peace in this, of belonging in other ways, in encounters. Next slide, please.
Taya, thank you. Part 2. The tides come and go twice a day, and Taya was one of those tides. Like Mysie, she was gorgeous with deep feelings and knowledges and connections with others. The histories of the world were embodied in her. And yet, life was not always easy. Her mother knew grief all too well. Taya was a part of her, and yet she would pull away and then return. Taya feels the magic of her mother, feels a part of her, Mother Sea, yet wonders from time to time if there's more. She wants to feel content and settled in being a part of the ocean, and she feels something of another story, a myth of needing to find her own path, one separate, one proving her worth and values separate from others. But where does that story come from? It's not the one from her ancestors or the ones her ancestors sing. When Taya settles into herself, breathes, breathes the rhythm of the whole sea, the myths of separateness recede, gently drawing from, even in the calmest of days, the undulating movement can be felt by all. Next slide, please.
And finally, we have Id, part 3. Now we get to meet a final character of the story, Id. Like Mysie and Thea, they're a lovely, magical being. As an idea, Ida knows everything. One moment, wisdom's intertwining, bringing forth woven spectacular feelings, spaces, places, items, and more. Because an idea never is. It's an amalgamation of many ideas, half ideas, even non ideas, those that don't even count. So, who am I? I'm idea, the idea, and ideas that form and grow and merge and end and evolve again. I move and travel through hands and touch. I am the life force that seeks form to be seen. And of struggles, challenges, and failures, Id also has found that kernels are floating and moving around. They remind themselves of who they are, a life force, and yet they can grow weary of the effort and a myth of doing. Next slide, please.
So we are seeking for new ways to be in the world differently, to do academia differently and leadership differently. What does this mean for arts-based and education research and in leadership? Creativity we define as a process of continuous flow. Within an open-ended assemblage, we consider non-human organisms here, mycelia, water, and crafted as co-creators alongside our lived experiences, positionalities, and ecologies. Our experience pulls from spaces of coloniality and post-coloniality and aim to decoloniality, which Oliveira describes as the process of hospicing modernity, in which we embrace the need for a political practice of healing, of radical tenderness that can enable us to step up and to show up differently, unlearning our learned ways, of thinking and imagining, of sensing and feeling, of relating to one another, the earth, and the cosmos. Inviting, inspired by Escobar, a pluriverse orientation. We seek to new ways to unlearn patriarchy, breaking and tearing apart from the old. We embrace heartbreak, vulnerability, and struggle to come together, to be with what is. And the coming together on itself is an emerging collectivity that is alive. And we bring our own stories, temporalities, lineages, tensions, matter, desire, and imagination. And the coming together is what makes it creative. It's what opens us to new things. So this is wayfinding for us, the process of moving within this arrangement, in and as part of it, attuning to aliveness of the world, inviting new possibilities, where new stories emerge, reminding us of our shared connection, of our shared aliveness. Next slide, please.
So, what does this all mean? What are these ideas? What are these different positionalities that we are talking about? And how do they help us find our way to a better world, to a better kind of leadership? We propose framing the process through the guiding principles for artful leadership as a framework for creative wayfinding as method. And we suggest and we offer these four principles: letting go of prescribed steps, pausing and embracing ideas, even the seemingly random ones, just letting ideas come, just allowing them to be. Second, we offer this idea and this principle of being open to the evolution of ideas and feelings and emotions and synchronicities. Third, to welcome in creating and sitting with tension, trust, vulnerability, where the tensions invites us to change to places that we have never been, to revisit places we've been, to pause and to understand and see how we are not the same person, how events and experiences and setbacks and failures, heartbreaks and successes, and the joy of coming together bring us to new positions and new ways of looking at things. And finally, we invite in an attunement to cohesiveness as movement, an aliveness within and beyond ourselves for shifts as we move in and as part of the world. Next slide, please.
So then as we come to a conclusion here, how can these ideas be integrated into our work in arts-based educational research, in leadership, in academia? And how, as part of this, we were thinking about then the toolkit that's part of the book and the ways forward. So these ideas that Nupur mentioned, Nadia has brought forward, that we've collectively spoken about today. So what can we critically reflect upon to become more aware? We can see, and so we shared three images, and you could create your own, and you could bring those. We then, suggest that here, what is an entity? And if you held up an item, and what is this in front of us together or online? What could the stories of these entities be? So we're talking about the letting go and what ideas come to us, and that creativity and the tension of not all academics like to go through that process. And, if we can be there, how might they speak with one another? How might I find meaning in myself and letting go of my academic voice and writing their story? And if this entity were then in academia, so this flower, let's say, were in academia, how might it struggle? How might it thrive? How might it find a way through? And how might it embody and show us new meaning and value? Next slide, please. So with that, we come to the close and we invite you to engage with these questions and others. Anything at any time you feel like reaching out around these topics, we would love to hear from you. We look forward to connecting. You have our emails then here. Feel free to link. We have one QR code for LinkedIn, and you can find in a recent post that I also tagged Nadia and Nupur, so you can also find them as well there. And here, a screenshot from our experience together in one of the times that we came together on a video chat for across the world in different places. So thank you so much, and we pass back. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And Nadia and Nupur, I'm sure that everyone will join me in just expressing how beautiful and inspiring that presentation was. And I'm very excited now to hand you over to our next speaker, Inba Naika.
Good afternoon, all. As Kathleen alluded, I'm Inba Naika, and I'm based at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which is located in Durban, South Africa, and on the continent of Africa. Colleagues, it is indeed a pleasure to dialogue with you on arts-based knowing and education, leadership, and management practice. Next slide, please. My presentation draws on work from a chapter for the handbook, which Kathleen spoke about earlier. And it is a chapter crafted by myself and two of my former PhD students, Ashkilin Govender and Rashida Khan. Ashkilin, I refer to him as, Ash in an affectionate way. He's actually a deputy head of a school in Ras Al Khaimah in the United Arab Emirates. And Rashida is a departmental head at an Islamic private school in South Africa. And however, given their work commitments, they unfortunately could not join me in this presentation. And, in our study, in our chapter that's in the handbook, we asked the question, what are we learning about arts-based educational research and its potential to understand and influence education, leadership, and management practice for educational transformation? Next slide, please. So let me first commence by, sketching the landscape of the field of education, leadership, and management to create some sense for the rationale for arts-based research in education, leadership, and management. If you take the field of education, leadership, and management, it's quite diverse. And it comprises of four entangled and interacting, pillars or components, namely policy, research, theory, and practice. Now, internationally, there is a growing interest in education, leadership, and management, owing to its significance in transforming underperforming institutions and sustaining productive organizations. And the literature points to good leadership and management contributing to as much as 27% to school success, and is only second to the quality of teaching and teachers in a school. Now, over the past 2-3 decades, there's been substantial growth in education, leadership, and management scholarship. For example, there's been quite a bit of scholarship on mapping and categorizing the knowledge base in educational leadership and management. There's scholarship around its methodological and theoretical approaches, and the scholarship around the different knowledge production spaces in education, leadership, and management. But in mapping how we come to know in education, leadership, and management, in other words, I'm referring to its methods and methodologies, scholars have raised concerns regarding the methods employed, particularly the lack of methodological diversity. There seems to be an over-reliance on traditional data production methods such as interviews, observations, document studies, and surveys, etc. Now, the paucity of methodological inventiveness in education, leadership, and management underscores the need for studies that disrupt the conventional qualitative methodologies and harness alternative research designs and creative methodologies to illuminate the complexities of phenomena in education, leadership, and management. Drawing on the scholar Betty St. Pierre, she talks about, and she says, by producing knowledge differently, it may open up possibilities for producing different knowledge in education, leadership, and management. Therefore, in my presentation, I focus on using a creative body of methods termed arts-based educational research as a vehicle for developing insights about education, leadership, and management practice and its potential for effecting change. As earlier, Anna, Nadia, and Nupur spoke about a new way in ABBA and leadership. This is also the crux, or part of my presentation as well this afternoon. Next slide, please. So, arts-based educational research refers to any educational inquiry that adopts the principles of the creative arts as part of its methodological framework. Similar to conventional qualitative research methods, the primary goal of arts-based educational research methods is to improve educational policy and practice. However, it does so not aimed at a quest for certainty, but to suggest new ways of viewing educational phenomena. Right? Arts-based educational research as well, it incorporates a rich tapestry of artistic and arts-inspired methods encompassing various modalities. They include, but are not limited to, the literary arts, for example, creative writing, memoir, poetry, dialogue, and epistolary forms, like letter writing, etc. Then you also have the performing arts, for example, dance, music, theater, the visual arts, drawing on collaging, drawings, film, painting, photography, object-based art. Then you also have the new media arts, for example, digital media, mixed media, and multimedia. Arts-based educational research methods are quite versatile, and they may be engaged with at different stages of the research process. They may be used in data production. They may be used in data presentation. They may be used in data analysis, and also in the dissemination of research outcomes. Next slide, please. So, to illustrate some arts-based educational research methods and its use and how it's used in educational, management research, and the potential of arts-based research to understand and influence education, leadership, and management practice for educational transformation. I present our experiences of using arts-based methods as vignettes. And, vignettes are simply, concise sketches that signal events, they introduce characters, they highlight findings, or summarize themes or issues. They provide a conduit between research and practice, and they offer a lens through which practice may be magnified. Now, our book chapter, presents 3 vignettes, each illustrating a distinct ABBA method and its potential to enhance education, leadership, and management research and practice. But, given the time constraints, in terms of this presentation, I will talk to 2 ABBA methods, so 2 arts-based educational research methods, namely photo elicitation and object inquiry. Next slide, please. So, in Vignette 1 in our book chapter as well, it presents Ash's use of photo elicitation. For his doctoral study, Ash explored the transnational experiences of South African expatriate teacher leaders in the Gulf Cooperation country schools. To facilitate participant storytelling, he employed photo elicitation during narrative interviews. Now, photo elicitation is simply a data production method that leverages visual stimuli like photos to evoke emotions, jog memories, and stimulate ideas in conversational or interview settings. Right? Photo illustration actually empowers participants to utilize images as cognitive triggers to articulate their experiences more deeply. In education, leadership, and management, photo elicitation, is emerging as a creative method for facilitating profound reflections. Now, there's a study that was done in South Africa by Botha and colleagues, and they employed photo elicitation to critically examine the exercise of power and control by school leaders. And similarly, Garcia Vera et al., they utilized photo elicitation in Spain to elucidate teachers' perspectives on fostering an enabling environment for school improvement and school effectiveness initiatives. In Ash's study, photo elicitation stimulated deeper participant introspection into the roles and responsibilities as teacher leaders, heightening their awareness of the impact their impact on their schools. Next slide, please. Now, one of Ash's participants, and Ash gives this participant a pseudonym, Chantel. So one of Ash's participants, Chantel, was able to share some of her teacher leadership practices by drawing on a photograph of her class group. The photo that you can see in the slideshow is of a class group. From a practice perspective, Chantel's photograph enabled her to speak about, things like around care-orientated pedagogy, as a leader in the classroom. And, in the chapter itself, you can read an extract from Chantel where she explains, if you look at the picture of the girls and me around my table, you will see that there are some local Kuwaiti children and some from different countries all over the world. They are around me like that because in my class, they know that we are one family. I am the mother and they are the children. I believe that if students respect me as a mother, then I can help them have a better future in school and in the lives that they will lead. And in Ash's study, several participants attested to the transformative potential of photo elicitation in the narrative accounts of leadership and management experiences. For example, there was a participant called Cabo, and one of his reflections of photo elicitation was, it was a creative way of reflecting on who I am as a person and as a leader. While Chantal underscored, photo elicitation as, a method that had a catalytic effect, where she stated that the photos serve not only as a means of narrating my story, but who I am and my leadership. It also created a conduit for reevaluation and recalibration of my story. Now, these testimonies underscore the efficacy of photo elicitation in unlocking rich, contextualized insights into leadership and management experiences, thereby enhancing the depth of the data produced. Next slide, please. Next, I look at the arts. I look at arts-based object inquiry, as a method. Arts-based object inquiry combines arts-based research practices with object-centered inquiry to explore different phenomena. It integrates arts-based research principles such as creativity and aesthetic consideration with object inquiry's focus on material culture. Objects are ubiquitous. They are everywhere. They permeate our surroundings and are central to our human ecology. According to the social semiotician Stephen Riggins, he says objects have dual meanings. The denotative, which he terms referencing, and the connotative, which he terms mapping. Now, when we describe the aesthetics, the functioning, and the utilitarian value of objects, we would be talking then about its denotative meanings or the referencing of the object. However, at a deeper level, in other words, connotative or mapping, objects are gateways to a web of human associations and meanings. Drawing on the connotative meanings, Kate Powell reminds us that every object tells a story because objects connect people to ideas and relationships. They are triggers for the sharing of life experiences and can serve as conduits to relate stories of self and others. And the stories told through objects are embodied because they engage the senses, they draw on the imagination, and they are creative. Now, it is the object stories that interest us in education, leadership, and management research. What potential does it hold for making visible ELM education, leadership, and management practices, and more importantly, for transforming practice? Now, object stories have been used in broader leadership and management research, for example, in organizational studies, and they're beginning to take root in educational leadership and management. In organizational studies, for example, Humphreys and Smith examined how objects give voice to organizational narratives. They argue that people and objects are enmeshed in the workplace. And through object practice, humans define what stories objects can tell. Next slide, please. As a research advisor in the academy, I make students aware of the power of objects in making visible leadership and management practices. I now draw on a former student of mine, Segi, and his use of object inquiry to make visible and transform his leadership practice. Now, Segi is a differently enabled former superintendent of education and teacher educator in education, leadership, and management. And he drew on a pair of crutches to generate object stories about his leadership. Now, the picture in the slide shows the pair of crutches. And Segi explains. He says, "My crutches signify to people that I'm a person with a disability. This sometimes triggers social, emotional, and psychological barriers in the people I come into contact with. When people see me using crutches, some of them see differentiation and they respond to me with a lens of otherness. People with disabilities are often seen as being different, and the othering perpetuates prejudice and discrimination. At the physical level, I appear to be very conspicuous. As a leader, Segi was anything but conspicuous. In his narrative, he articulates the challenges of identity construction as a leader, highlighting how his experiences precipitated a heightened sense of social justice awareness and how this informed his leadership praxis. He says, paradoxically, I'm invisible in the workplace because I struggle to gain the respect of my colleagues and seniors. As a superintendent of education and a leadership coach, I found it difficult to lead and influence others because of the stereotypes associated with my disabilities. My personal experience of discrimination and prejudice heightened my sense of social justice, and this shaped my values and beliefs, which in turn influenced my leadership practice. For Segi, the crutches as well also served as an instrument for self-introspection. And, this enables Segi to engage in a process of what we call self-reflexive leadership identity formation. And of course, a subsequent transformation of his leader self. And he says, and this is what Segi says, he says, to offset the stereotypes associated with people and disability, I learned that I would have to prove to other members of the organization that I was a competent and capable leader of the team. I therefore worked very hard to debunk the disability stereotype. I led by example and made earnest efforts, to be role model behaviors and attitudes that were expected of other team members. Expected of other team members. Then he says, I was able to influence decisions. The reflexive stance that I adopted increased my awareness of how I was leading, and this stimulated growth to assuage the prejudice I experienced. For Segi, the crutch was an important object for reflection. And he goes on to say, looking at my crutches, I contemplated my leadership style and the philosophy that underpins my leadership practice. The crutches sharply brought into focus the notion that they offered themselves to me in an act of service. Likewise, I'm drawn towards servant leadership and offer leadership as an act of service to the organization and the people who work there. In my leadership practice, I served others by enacting the servant leadership dimensions, which include emotional leading, empowering, putting subordinates first, behaving ethically, and servanthood. So let me move on to some concluding thoughts. Next slide, please. So some of my concluding thoughts around ABBA and education leadership and management practice, And I say, ABBA offers, or arts-based educational leadership, arts-based educational research, it offers possibilities for a creative thinking space, and it serves as a gateway for embodied reflection, deep reflection, and narrative construction. They not only enhance the understanding of education leadership and management, but also hold the potential to inspire leaders and managers to reimagine their practice through a transformative lens. Furthermore, for leaders and managers, reading arts-based educational research studies in education leadership and management the scholarship may evoke resonant moments leading to change in the personal and professional selves, which ultimately, there might be a reimagination of practice, and it can also contribute to enhanced organizational success and a deeper connection to the values underpinning their work. So you will notice that on the slide, I also put in a recent publication on arts-based educational research. If you want to know more about arts-based research and its application in the research process, I suggest that you access a copy of this book. The book also contains, several exemplars of arts-based educational research methods in several disciplines and how it may be used in the research process. So if you want to know more, I suggest, you read this book. Colleagues, I think my time is up, and thank you for listening to me, and I hand you over to the session chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inba, for that very informative and thought-provoking presentation. So we're going to ask you, please, to share any comments or questions that you have. And while people are doing that in the chat, I will also just share some reflections that I've had. So in thinking about these fascinating presentations, some of the things that came to mind were how arts-based approaches help us to uncover, make visible, confront complexities in leadership. They don't offer smooth, conventional accounts of leadership and what it should be. And because of that, they help us to foster creative, innovative problem solving. And they encourage leadership dialogue grounded in social and educational and ecological justice. And this matters because leadership is central to so much of what we do as human beings and perhaps non-human beings as well. And leadership that is inclusive, ethical, and transformative is fundamental for changing education and for social change. And arts-based educational research helps us to embrace uncertainty and experimentation in leadership in challenging contexts and times, to reimagine what we can do as leaders and with leadership, and create spaces for innovation and justice-centered change. And I thought that it was really appropriate to finish my comments by looking at this beautiful image, another painting by Daisy Pillay, which she called The Antidote. And I wonder if arts-based educational research in leadership and management could be part of the antidote to some of the pressing challenges that we are facing globally. So we're going to see if there are any questions or comments by our attendees that we can respond to. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can have a look at those questions and comments. So I've seen a comment on how beautiful the first presentation was. Thank you very much for that comment. Are there any other comments or questions or any comments that our speakers would like to make? We've got 5 minutes left before we end.
Yes, Kathleen, I'd just like to say something, from our presentations, both the presentations, arts-based educational research sounds very rosy, and one would think that, when you present this at, conferences and seminars, etc., that, everyone is happy and they say, hey, it's a hunky-dory, methods and methodology. But that's not the case, and there's huge pushback to arts-based educational research. And often, questions are raised around its subjectivity and trustworthiness. And I would just like to sound a word of advice to, all those that engage in arts-based research methods, in that we need to be doubly careful, in our scholarship, in the sense that we need to always, make clear the quality standards that we observe when engaging in arts-based educational research. And, in some of my scholarship, and I also get my students to do this, to make clear all the steps that they follow to ensure trustworthiness, like engaging critical friends for critique of work in progress, presenting work in progress at seminars and conferences to get feedback, engaging in researcher self-reflexivity, engaging in member checking. All these quality standards enhance the trustworthiness of arts-based educational research. So I just thought I'll say that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Inver. I see we have a question from Amanda about whether there is a framework to work to, or a method or a process. So I'm going to ask our first group of presenters, would you identify a particular framework or method or process in your arts-based educational research?
Thank you, Kathleen, for reading this out, and thank you for the question. I guess so, Amanda, I think that in particular, Newport and Nadia, you can jump in, but I would say those 4 points that Newport that you mentioned, they offer a framework of, letting in creativity, letting that flow, sitting with the discomfort, those different aspects that offers the framework, and then adding on, as you were saying, Inba, right? That of course, right? This is all of our research and the methodology. This is based upon recognizing of a process and the reflectiveness, as you're saying, the engaging with one another and understanding more what's there as research, and how that then can transform into how we embody it. And so one of the things that we were chatting, Newport and Nadia and I were also commenting, reflecting on the process after the presentation. We want to thank you, Kathleen and team, for offering this space to be able to do research in a way that, I'm trying to figure the word, right? As you say, non-normative, but then that's in comparison to the normative. Instead of offering, and I think your phrasing, right, that the antidote to challenges, it's a new way forward. And so then as we work with our students, as we work with colleagues, that we can open our minds to other kinds of frameworks, recognizing that there are other ways, there are avenues for publishing, there are avenues for recognizing the importance of the scholarship and of being and what that means for the world.
Thank you very much. Just to finish off in our last minute, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. It was just so wonderful to have you with us here today and to benefit from your wisdom and experience. And I'd like to thank everybody who attended, and we thank you for your comments and questions. And we look forward to many more discussions about artful leadership and arts-based educational research. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
And we look forward to many more discussions about artful